Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Research Connects. I'm your host, Cliff Lamb, and we're live at the 2026 Animal Ag Tech Innovation Summit in Fort Worth. With me today, and fortunate to have Lee Leachman. Lee is an industry leader in cattle genetics, and so welcome and thanks for taking the time to meet with us today.
You bet. Always fun to visit with you, Cliff.
Yeah. So, Lee, you've always been an industry leader, early adopter. You're a visionary in the cattle industry. So, why don't you share with us sort of some of the things that have happened over the last 20 years that we're seeing come to fruition today that might have been just ideas 20 years ago that you've seen?
You bet. I mean, it's kind of fun. It's a great time to be raising cattle, not just because of great prices, but because we have a lot of tools that we didn't have, right? I mean, we've got this phone, we have computer programs, we have all kinds of stuff, right? Probably the biggest one impacting our business, which is genetic selection, is the use of genomics. The tools are so much more accurate than what we had before. And we see that in a number of ways. We see we can move our population mean faster, we can move more traits at the same time, and we make less mistakes. We can tell from looking at genomics whether a bull's daughters are going to have the udder quality of the dam, the udder quality of the sire, or somewhere in between, or better than both, right? We can tell that, and that lets our decisions be so much better. So that's probably the biggest one for me, but I'm also really keen on some of the new technology that we have on how we gather phenotypes. We measure feed intake on about 15,000 animals a year. A machine does that for us, right? We don't actually go out there and measure how much they're eating. The machine tells us. We got another machine that's looking at body shape for muscle composition. That's pretty cool, right? We all did linear measurements. We looked at cattle. Turns out the machine probably does that better than we do. ID now, we're looking at almost every animal we have as an electronic ID. We might move to two. We might do a high frequency and a low frequency. We want to know where they are. We just signed a contract to go to virtual fence. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that we see. Why? We want to measure cattle accurately. Labor's still a shortage. So how can we economize on our labor?
That's awesome, yeah. So tell me a little bit more in sort of thinking ahead now over the next 20 years, right? Yep. I mean, how far can we go and what are some of the things we should be looking into?
Well, I think the opportunity today is we're actually going to be able to make cattle do things that we never thought was possible. And I think I always use the example, we'll look at what chickens did, right? I mean, they lay more eggs, they grow twice as fast, they eat the same amount of feed per day, they're way more efficient, right? The breasts are bigger. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff they did, and if somebody probably sat in a room and said, what are chickens going to be like in 20 years? Somebody said, oh, they're going to be like this, and everybody said, no, that's not possible. I think the same is true with cattle. We were just talking a minute ago about reproduction. Reproduction's probably the biggest suck of efficiency in our industry, right? I mean, we breed a set of cows, depending on where and for how long, you're going to get between 75% and 95% of them pregnant. Well, when that number's closer to 75, you have a huge loss of efficiency. I think we can select for that. I think we can design breeding systems and management systems that'll consistently move that average up. Sure. And I think that's cool. I think the other thing that I look for today, if you said, what's it going to look like 10 years from now, right? 10 years ago, we'd say we're going to make the beef quality better. That's happened, right? And largely because of genetics, but also some management. I think the next 10 years, we're going to make these cattle much more muscular without losing the maternal and the eating quality. That's the trick, right? The reason we haven't done it, we don't want to wreck the cow. We don't want to ruin the beef. I think we have the tools now to move that mean without running into that problem.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Yeah. I mean, I think huge opportunities there. So last question, I run a large research agency in AgriLife Research. We've got to invest in the future, right? I mean, we talked a little bit about reproduction. Tell me a little bit on the intelligent ag systems, the AI, machine learning, sensor technology, those things. Do you see those changing animal agriculture?
Absolutely, and I see it, decision support, okay?
Yep.
I'm 60 years old. I probably have a different perspective than I had when I was 40, but there's too much information. How do I digest that to make a decision. I think this is a big area where AI and this type of research converge to make tools that are usable, right? The history of decision support, I work with guys that build these fancy models on how we're going to mate the cows in your herd to optimize the bull. And you know what? No one uses the model because it's so darn complicated. It takes an expert to run it, okay? So I really believe that there's a way that AI will make that more accessible. And I think that's a kind of interesting area. I mean, our task as marketers, or your task as an educator, is to get a message that people can absorb and utilize. How do we do that, right? And I think, I go back to my age, at some point, using all this stuff's hard.
Yep.
Somebody's going to make a lot of money by using this easy.
Yep.
And I think that's a job for Extension today. How do we make all that information easy for the producer to translate into decisions?
Yep. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot for taking the time. And that wraps up this episode of Research Connects. I want to thank Lee again for taking the time in your schedule today. And then want to let everybody know that they can catch more episodes throughout the summit or on our social media sites. So thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.